She pulled me close, like letting go was the last thing she could bear. It's emotionally charged, hints at tension, intimacy, and curiosity, and instantly draws viewers in without revealing too much. The first time he saw her, it felt like stepping into a different rhythm of life, one that was calm yet quietly magnetic. She wasn't loud or flamboyant. There was no exaggerated charm, no deliberate attempt to draw attention. Yet she had an effortless presence that subtly made everything around her feel softer, warmer. He noticed the way she moved through the space, not hurriedly, but with careful, graceful steps, each one deliberate yet natural, like she belonged completely to the world she walked through. From across the room, he watched her fingers brush over the spines of books as she passed, pausing just long enough to read the titles. There was a small, almost imperceptible smile on her lips, the kind that suggested private thoughts or memories too delicate to share aloud. The sunlight caught strands of her hair, giving them a glow that seemed almost like an unspoken invitation to come closer, to see more than the surface. Every detail, from the way her eyes lingered on an object to the slight tilt of her head when she listened, made him feel both curious and cautious. He didn't want to interrupt her world, yet a quiet pull kept drawing his gaze back. He felt an unexpected tension in his chest, a mixture of admiration and self-awareness. There was an age difference, subtle but present in the way she carried herself, a quiet confidence born from life's trials, a grace cultivated from experiences he had yet to encounter. He wondered if she would notice him at all, or if he was just another shadow passing by her light. Even so, he felt compelled to observe, to understand the layers behind her smile, behind the gentle laugh that echoed softly in the space. His attention was drawn to the small details that made her human, approachable, and impossibly captivating all at once. The faint scent of her perfume, soft, floral, almost nostalgic, seemed to linger even when she moved, wrapping around him like a memory he hadn't yet lived. The warmth of her presence was palpable, almost like standing too close to sunlight on a cold morning. Comforting, yet with a sharp awareness that this was something delicate, something to handle carefully. As he hesitated, a part of him imagined the possibility of conversation, the awkward stumble of words, and the thrill of connecting with someone so unexpectedly profound. He imagined asking her something simple, a question about a book, a comment about the weather, and finding that she responded with that same warmth that seemed to radiate without effort. The thought alone made his pulse quicken. Even in those first silent moments, he felt the subtle tension of possibility. The air between them seemed charged, not with desire, but with curiosity, with the kind of magnetic pull that makes you notice everything about someone without understanding why. He was aware of the social gap, the age difference, and yet it didn't matter in the quiet orbit they now shared. The key here is to show the audience the magnetic draw she has on him, establishing that slow-burn intrigue that will carry the story forward. Focus on the tiny, sensory moments, sunlight on her hair, the warmth of her presence, the sound of her laughter, the subtle gestures that reveal her life experience. Let the male narrator's internal thoughts guide the audience into a world where admiration, hesitation, and fascination are tangible, setting the stage for a romance that grows naturally and beautifully. The first real moment between them came almost by accident. He hadn't planned to speak, had even convinced himself that watching from afar was enough. But life has a quiet way of nudging you into what you can't resist. Perhaps it was the way she fumbled with her bag strap, or the small sigh she let out when a book slipped to the floor. He couldn't be sure. What he did know was that, without thinking, he was there, bending down to pick it up before she could. When their hands met briefly on the worn cover, there was an unexpected spark, subtle, fleeting, but undeniable. The warmth of her skin, the softness of her fingers, and the natural hesitancy in her touch lingered in his mind long after. He realized he was studying her, not as an outsider, but as someone suddenly permitted a glimpse into her private world. The way her eyes lifted to meet his was disarming. Clear, intelligent, and yet cautious, as if she were measuring not just him, but the space between them. She thanked him with a quiet smile, a gesture that carried more than mere politeness. It carried acknowledgement, a hint of openness that made his chest tighten. There was a melody in her voice, soft yet assured, that seemed to resonate deeper than words themselves. For a moment, everything else fell away. The hum of the room, the shuffle of other people, the persistent awareness of age and difference. All that existed was the simple, delicate closeness of shared attention. They exchanged words cautiously at first, simple observations about the book, the weather, or the small absurdities of life. Yet even in those small sentences, there was meaning. He noticed the subtleties, the way her gaze lingered a little longer on certain words, the gentle curve of her lips as she considered an answer, the occasional laugh that sounded like it came from a place of private understanding. Every gesture, no matter how small, felt like an invitation to understand her better. The air between them was charged with curiosity and an unspoken acknowledgement of possibility. Neither of them pushed too hard, but every glance, every smile, every subtle touch hinted at something neither could fully articulate. When their hands brushed as she adjusted a loose strand of hair, the fleeting contact carried a quiet intensity, a message of "I notice you," without speaking a word. He felt his pulse quicken, not with desire in the physical sense, but with the exhilarating awareness of mutual recognition. There was also hesitation, the kind born from respect and a subtle understanding of the social gap between them. He wondered if he was overstepping, if his attention would be misread, yet he couldn't pull away. She seemed equally aware, pausing before laughter, tilting her head with a mixture of curiosity and caution, as if testing the waters of something new yet familiar. By the end of their first conversation, something had shifted. The connection was delicate, almost fragile, yet undeniably present. They had shared small worlds, small moments, and in doing so had acknowledged the possibility of something deeper. The audience should feel that quiet, intimate tension, the pull of curiosity, the thrill of recognition, and the warm hum of two lives brushing against one another without fully colliding. This moment is pivotal. It sets the stage for trust, emotional intimacy, and the subtle romantic tension that will grow over time. Focus on sensory details, the warmth of touch, the timbre of voice, the lingering gaze, and the male narrator's reflective, sincere perspective, which makes the audience feel every heartbeat of this initial connection. After their first meaningful exchange, the male narrator found himself thinking about her constantly. It wasn't just her beauty or the effortless grace in her gestures. It was the way she made ordinary moments feel weighty, alive, and tender. Each time they met again, even in the smallest encounters, he noticed more. The subtle way she observed the world, the quiet strength behind her laughter, the moments when her eyes held unspoken thoughts that hinted at experiences he couldn't yet fully grasp. Their conversation started to grow longer, meandering into topics neither would have shared with strangers. He found himself listening more than speaking, captivated by the nuances in her stories, the honesty in her reflections. She spoke of things that mattered to her, moments of vulnerability, glimpses of joy, faint regrets, and quiet triumphs. And when she shared these, there was a soft hesitancy, a pause as if she were testing whether he would stay present with her, without judgment. In those pauses, he realized that this connection was not only rare but fragile, and it made his attention sharper, his care more deliberate. Physical closeness began to appear naturally, as part of shared space rather than deliberate intimacy. Sitting side by side on a park bench, the warmth of her shoulder brushed against his without comment, yet the impact on him was profound. The gentle rise and fall of her breath, the faint scent of her hair carried in the breeze, the light pressure of her hand brushing against his when adjusting her coat, each moment registered in full detail. These touches were unassuming, everyday gestures, yet they resonated with a depth he had not anticipated. He noticed small patterns in her behavior, the way she would tuck her hair behind her ear when nervous, or the way her eyes softened when recounting moments of personal significance. He realized that the subtlety of these details made her more real, more human, and more captivating than any dramatic gesture ever could. Their laughter became more relaxed, more familiar, and the spaces between words were filled with unspoken understanding. There was also a tension beneath the surface, a quiet hesitation that made the connection feel alive and precious. He sensed that she was holding parts of herself back, carefully weighing how much to reveal, as if guarding against being hurt or misunderstood. At the same time, he felt the thrill of slowly being trusted, of being invited into her world piece by piece. The contrast between her confidence and her quiet vulnerability made every smile, every glance, every subtle touch charged with meaning. By the end of these encounters, it was clear that a bond was forming, not rushed, not urgent, but deliberate, meaningful, and emotional. The audience should feel the slow, almost imperceptible weaving of two lives into a shared rhythm. Each gesture, glance, and whispered laugh adds layers to their connection, making the eventual deeper intimacy inevitable yet earned. This keynote sets the stage for the first moments of tender, meaningful affection, establishing trust and emotional closeness that will make their eventual physical and emotional intimacy resonate. Focus on the narrator's reflective awareness, the sensory richness of their environment, and the quiet tension that simmers just below the surface, keeping viewers invested in the subtle, slow-burn romance. There was a quiet evening when everything shifted. They were sitting together, perhaps after a long walk, the sun dipping low and painting the sky in muted shades of gold and rose. It wasn't planned. These moments rarely were, but the universe seemed to pause around them, allowing the space for something unspoken to surface. He noticed the way her shoulders relaxed only when she was near him, how her hands lingered slightly on her knees before brushing against his accidentally. These small touches, almost imperceptible, carried an intimacy that words could never fully capture. The moment arrived, naturally, almost reluctantly. She stumbled slightly, not enough to fall, but enough that he reached instinctively to steady her. Their hands met, fingers curling gently together, and he felt the warmth of her skin through the lightest contact. The world seemed to hush in that instant, as though everything else, the noise, the expectations, the judgments, slipped away. She didn't pull away. Instead, she allowed the contact to linger, her body leaning subtly into his as if seeking the reassurance of presence. He realized that this was more than a reflexive gesture. It was trust, fragile and precious. He felt her heartbeat through the gentle press of her hand against his. It was not fast or frantic, but steady, grounding, and intensely human. The subtle tremor in her fingers when they lingered together spoke volumes, a quiet acknowledgement of desire restrained, of emotion held delicately at the surface. He found himself aware of every nuance, the warmth radiating from her wrist, the softness of her touch, the faint scent of her hair carried in the evening air. Each detail etched itself into his memory, creating a sensory imprint that words could not convey. Their eyes met, and there was a pause, a moment of suspended time. No one spoke, yet everything was communicated in the gentle tension between them. The quiet vulnerability in her gaze mirrored the growing anticipation he felt in his own chest. His hand instinctively rested against her back, not pressing, just offering a steady, comforting presence. She responded subtly, leaning a fraction closer, her cheek nearly brushing against his chest. It was a closeness that felt sacred, a silent confession of trust, and an unspoken question, will you stay? There was a tension that hummed beneath the surface, electric yet tender. It was not urgency or impatience, but the delicate thrill of two people discovering the boundaries of affection, exploring the closeness they both secretly longed for. He felt the duality of the moment, the warmth of intimacy and the restraint imposed by respect, the desire to linger and the caution to preserve the fragile trust being built. By the end of this tender exchange, something had shifted irrevocably. The connection was no longer just curiosity or admiration. It had evolved into something profoundly emotional. Every glance, every lingering touch, and every unspoken sentiment built a foundation for deeper intimacy. The audience should feel the charged stillness of this scene, the soft brush of hands, the subtle leaning in, the quiet heartbeat that speaks louder than words. This keynote is pivotal. It establishes physical closeness that is emotionally resonant, marking the first step from friendship and admiration into the delicate territory of romantic tension. Focus on sensory richness, the subtle cues of trust and desire, and the male narrator's reflective, heart-driven awareness, ensuring viewers are emotionally invested in their slow-burn connection. Even as their closeness grew, life's realities crept in, testing the fragile intimacy they had begun to build. The male narrator felt at first as a small, persistent unease, an almost imperceptible tension that lingered in the spaces between their smiles and touches. It wasn't anything she had done, nor a moment of obvious friction. It was the subtle weight of awareness. The age gap between them was no longer just a quiet observation. It was a living, breathing presence in every thought, a reminder that the world might not understand their connection as he did. He found himself questioning every gesture. Was her lingering hand meant as reassurance, or was it a fleeting reflex? Was her gaze filled with warmth, or was it a careful balancing act between affection and caution? Each uncertainty gnawed at him, turning the excitement of their growing intimacy into a tangle of self-doubt. He knew he wanted to be near her, to be trusted with her vulnerability, but fear of overstepping, of misreading signals, began to shadow his desire. She, too, carried a subtle hesitation, though it manifested differently. He noticed it in the micro-expressions, the slight pause before laughter, the careful distance she sometimes held when he reached for her hand, the faint tightness in her shoulders when a conversation drifted toward the personal. Her own experiences, her life's lessons, and perhaps her quiet fear of being misunderstood made her cautious. Every moment of closeness was interlaced with the silent question, can I allow myself to be seen fully? A seemingly ordinary day became charged with unspoken tension. Perhaps a casual remark from a friend or an accidental comment about age or life experience hung in the air longer than it should have, leaving him replaying the words over and over in his mind. He noticed how she shifted subtly, how her eyes momentarily dropped, how her hands fidgeted just slightly, tiny signals that spoke louder than any direct confrontation could. His chest tightened as he realized the fragility of what they shared, the way a single misunderstanding could unravel the delicate bond they had begun to weave. In private, he wrestled with his own thoughts. He thought about the risks of caring too much, of letting himself hope too freely, and yet the pull toward her remained irresistible. He remembered the warmth of her hand, the steady rhythm of her heartbeat against his shoulder, the quiet trust she had allowed him to hold. Each memory reinforced the gravity of his feelings, making hesitation not a lack of desire, but a mark of respect for what they were building together. The conflict was not dramatic or explosive. It was internal, slow-burning, a tension that simmered beneath every shared glance and every brief touch. The audience should feel this emotional tightrope, the thrill of intimacy countered by the fear of loss, the desire for closeness restrained by the respect for vulnerability. The stakes were real, yet unspoken, creating anticipation for the resolution to come. By the end of this part, viewers understand that love is rarely straightforward. The tension of hesitation and the weight of social perception enrich the slow burn, making the eventual emotional and physical intimacy more meaningful. This keynote sets the stage for the climactic emotional breakthrough, where trust and vulnerability finally meet, and the restrained desire and care they feel for each other become undeniable. Everything they had been feeling, the hesitation, the small touches, the lingering glances, culminated in a quiet, charged moment that neither could ignore. It wasn't a dramatic confession shouted over storms or under starlight. It was the kind of honesty that arises naturally when the world around them fades, leaving only the truth of their emotions. He noticed it first in her eyes, the way they searched his face as if trying to read the unspoken words he hadn't yet found the courage to say. And in that look, he recognized his own need mirrored back at him. The desire to be close, the fear of losing her, and the aching awareness that this bond was already too important to ignore. She moved closer, almost imperceptibly, as though drawn by the same gravity that pulled him toward her. When their hands met, it was deliberate this time, lingering without apology. He felt the warmth of her skin seep into his own, grounding him in the moment. Her fingers intertwined with his, but not in a rush or an urgent gesture. It was measured, steady, a conscious invitation to stay, to be present. The subtle tremor in her hand told him everything he needed to know. She was nervous, she was cautious, but she was willing. The air between them seemed to thicken, filled with unspoken acknowledgement of everything that had passed and everything yet to come. He rested his hand gently on her back, tracing the soft line of her shoulder, feeling her inhale softly, her body leaning in just slightly. The faint scent of her hair, carried in the cool evening air, wrapped around him in a delicate, almost intoxicating way. Every detail, her warmth, the softness of her voice, the steady rhythm of her breathing, was magnified, each sensory imprint echoing in his chest like a quiet symphony of intimacy. They didn't need words at first. A pause stretched between them, filled only with the silent communication of trust and understanding. In that suspended moment, he felt her vulnerability and courage entwined with his own desire to protect and cherish her. When she finally spoke, it was a whisper, almost shy, yet brimming with honesty. "I don't want to let go." Her confession, simple as it was, carried a weight that left him breathless. Without hesitation, he pulled her closer, allowing the gravity of the moment to settle around them. Her cheek pressed lightly against his chest, and he felt the quiet steadiness of her heartbeat, a rhythm that somehow matched his own. Their bodies aligned naturally, not in urgency, but in harmony. Every breath, every subtle movement conveyed the truth of their emotions more than words ever could. He realized that this closeness, this tender, restrained intimacy, was exactly what he had been seeking, and that she had been searching for it too. The tension that had simmered for weeks melted in the warmth of that embrace. The age difference, the hesitation, the social concerns, all faded into insignificance compared to the gravity of their connection. The audience should feel the depth of this intimacy, the gentle pressure of her hand, the brush of her hair, the quiet trust that now defined their bond. It's a climax that is emotional, sensory, and deeply human, showing that love built on care, respect, and gradual vulnerability carries a resonance that is unforgettable. This moment sets the stage for the final resolution, where their tender affection settles into comforting warmth, affirming that the slow-burn journey was worth every hesitant step, every lingering glance, and every heartbeat shared. After weeks of hesitation, stolen glances, and careful touches, the tension that had quietly guided their connection finally eased into a comforting warmth. The male narrator felt it first in the subtle way she allowed herself to linger near him, the soft exhalation she released when their hands met, and the faint, contented smile that seemed to settle naturally across her lips. It was a quiet acknowledgement that they had crossed an invisible line, from curiosity to trust, from admiration to genuine affection. They found themselves in a familiar, unhurried space, perhaps sitting on a park bench where they had shared some of their earliest conversations, the sun dipping behind the horizon and painting the sky in muted shades of amber and rose. The world around them felt softer, quieter, as if it had recognized the delicate resolution of their tension and was giving them permission to simply be. He noticed the gentle warmth of her hand as it brushed against his, no longer tentative but steady, affirming and fully present. Each detail, the way her hair fell softly across her shoulder, the faint scent of her perfume mingling with the evening air, the light pressure of her hand against his, was etched into his memory like a quiet celebration of trust earned and reciprocated. They spoke little, letting the silence carry the weight of what words could not convey. Yet even in the quiet, there was conversation, the soft rhythm of shared breathing, the gentle shifting to sit closer, the fleeting brushing of shoulders that spoke volumes. Her head rested lightly against his chest for a moment, and he felt the steady beat of her heart, a rhythm that mirrored the careful steadiness of his own. That subtle closeness, her warmth, the gentle tremor in her fingers, the softness of her presence, conveyed all the affection, desire, and relief that had been building over their slow journey together. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel fully, without hesitation or self-consciousness. The fear of misreading signals, of being too forward, of losing her, was replaced with the clarity that they had arrived at something rare and human: mutual understanding, affection, and emotional intimacy. He marveled at the quiet power of their connection, how it had grown without spectacle, without dramatics, yet carried a gravity that nothing else could match. In these final moments, small gestures spoke louder than any words. A hand resting lightly on her back, a gentle squeeze of her fingers, the brush of his thumb across her knuckles. Each movement reinforced the bond they had nurtured. Her eyes met his, full of warmth, trust, and the faint, shy acknowledgement of a desire held in check but deeply felt. There was no rush, no urgency, only the steady, grounding presence of two people who had discovered that love could be patient, tender, and enduring. As the sun finally set, leaving the world bathed in soft twilight, he realized that this was the resolution they both had needed. The slow burn of fascination, trust, and hesitant affection had blossomed into a profound emotional connection. The audience should feel the satisfaction or romance that unfolded naturally, with every glance, every touch, and every heartbeat contributing to a story of love that is warm, human, and deeply resonant. This final keynote completes the arc. The characters are fully emotionally aligned. The tension has resolved into affectionate intimacy, and the slow-burn romance achieves a warm, satisfying conclusion. It leaves the audience with a lingering feeling of connection, care, and the quiet thrill of love that is patient, deliberate, and profoundly human.